Hi there, welcome to episode 15 of Posture Labs and Alignment Fundamentals. This week we'll be covering Utkata Konasana, goddess pose. I don't think I personally have ever said the Sanskrit name of goddess pose, so that was a little bit new for me. Let's go ahead and kind of jump right into things. So in goddess pose, the most important thing is I want your knees kind of pointing out over your toes. Our toes are going to be pointing out on an angle, so you will be externally rotating your thighs. We don't want the knees falling inwards. If anything, think of a constant press out. There's a machine at the gym that some of us might be familiar with, where you sit down and then press your knees out to open up your hips. That's exactly what we're going to be doing in goddess pose. So I want you to find a standing position, kind of the same width you would for your wide leg fold, Prasarita Padottanasana. So take your arms out, your wrists should be over your ankles. From there, that's your good foot width. I want you to spin your heels in and your toes out. So you kind of feel already like a squeeze of the glute muscles together. The more you squeeze the glute muscles together, the more your thighs can rotate outwards, and that's exactly what we want. Then I'm going to have you bring your hands to your heart center and imagine sliding down a wall behind you. So you're not leaning forward, you're sliding down as you bend your knees. Now you'll start to feel this pose pretty quickly. Once you get down into your goddess pose, I want you to think about pressing through the outer edges of your feet and your heels. That's going to avoid the collapse inwards onto the inner edges and your knees falling inwards. The more you press out, the more your knees will come out over your toes. So if you look down, you kind of want to think about your knee following your second toe in that direction. Think about your thighs externally rotating. So this inner thigh is almost coming up towards the ceiling, and the outer thigh is dropping down behind you. Pull your belly button back towards your rib cage, and then pull your ribs in towards your hips. You can have your hands at heart center. You could have your arms reaching up, cactus arms, really whatever feels good. Try not to lean forward. We want to keep the shoulders stacked over the hips, sink down a little bit lower, like your tailbone is dropping towards the mat, and then come back up. Whew. Feel free to turn your toes in and grab a quick forward fold to kind of shake that out. You might also be getting into this pose from a forward fold. Let's go ahead and do that. From your wide leg forward fold, lift up halfway. Turn your toes out and then start to bend your knees. So now your torso will be hinged forward, but as you stand up, you're going to lean your shoulders back over your hips. Bring your hands to heart center. Sit down a little bit lower. Think about sliding down a wall behind you. Relax your shoulders. Feel a gentle lift through the crown of your head so your neck is nice and straight, spine nice and straight. Continue to press your knees outwards away from each other. And try not to grip the mat with your toes. Sit down a little bit lower for 3, 2, and 1. Rise all the way up, reach your arms up, and then again, grab a quick forward fold, put your hands down. Awesome work. So in your goddess pose, we might do some other fun things. For example, we might come into our goddess pose and put our hands on our thighs. At this point, your torso leans a little bit forward. This is more of a variation of goddess pose. Sometimes we twist right shoulder towards left knee, left shoulder towards right knee. Some people like to make it more challenging and lift the heels up. I like this because you really engage your calves. However, you might notice that your knees start to fall inward. So think about continuing to press the knees out. Externally rotate your thighs. Pull your belly button back for 3, 2, 1, rise all the way back up. Goddess pose can be very challenging for people, especially if we hold it for a long time. You really want to channel that inner fire, inner strength. Continue breathing, and then keep the external rotation. Keep pressing through the outer edges of the feet. That's probably the most important part of the pose, at least to me. Lastly, it's easy to kind of arch your back here and flare the ribs out. So I like to really think about tucking the ribs in and trying to get the ribs closer to the hips and hips closer to the ribs, kind of squeezing your entire abdominal area. That is Utkata Konasana, or goddess pose. If you have other tips, tricks, or cues you really like in goddess pose, go ahead and let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I will see you next week for our next tutorial.